Imagine for a moment that in June 1968, one campaign aide decides that maybe leading a presidential candidate through a crowded hotel kitchen immediately after a victory speech is not ideal security policy. So instead of cutting to the pantry at the Ambassador Hotel, Robert F. Kennedy exits through the ballroom. A few seconds later, shots ring out. But RFK is nowhere near the line of fire.
Perfect.
Siren is arrested anyway, instantly becoming America's most infamous failed assassin.
Perfect.
Which is probably not the title he was aiming for. The survival of Kennedy completely scrambles the 1968 election. Suddenly Democrats have something they haven't enjoyed in months. Hope!
Perfect.
Mixed with panic and several cigarettes. Vice President Hubert Humphrey still has the party establishment behind him. But RFK has momentum.
Perfect.
Anti-war voters, minority voters, young voters, and the distinct advantage of not looking like he personally approved every decision made in Vietnam. At the Democratic Convention in Chicago, party leaders reluctantly conclude that nominating Kennedy is preferable to watching their convention turn into a live-action disaster film. RFK wins the nomination and selects Senator Walter Mondale as his running mate.
Perfect.
Youthful idealism paired with Midwestern competence.
Perfect.
Which sounds less inspiring when phrased that way. Against Republican Richard Nixon, Kennedy campaigns on ending the Vietnam War,
Perfect.
fighting poverty and healing national divisions.
Perfect.
Nixon offers law and order. Kennedy essentially replies, yes, but perhaps without everyone screaming all the time. Narrowly, Americans decide this sounds refreshing. President Kennedy enters office in 1969, with the country politically exhausted and emotionally held together by coffee and unresolved trauma. Vietnam is gradually de-escalated earlier than in our timeline, likely avoiding Cambodia and some of the massive protests that followed.
Perfect.
Conservatives accuse him of weakness. Student activists accuse him of moving too slowly. In other words, he is now officially president. Domestically, RFK governs like a more intense version of his brother John F. Kennedy.
Perfect.
Civil rights enforcement expands.
Perfect.
Anti-poverty programs grow.
Perfect.
And organized crime figures suddenly begin having very stressful mornings. The economy remains shaky. Because the 1970s refused to happen to anyone pleasantly. But Kennedy's personal popularity stays strong enough to beat Governor Ronald Reagan in 1972. And Nixon? Nixon spends the 1970s giving bitter interviews, writing angry memoirs, and watching another Kennedy occupy the White House. Which, medically speaking, probably caused him to age like unrefrigerated lettuce.